welcome everybody for joining us today. Really glad to have you here. My name is Yvonne Scoggins. I work for Baypoint Wealth. I'm one of the financial advisors here. And we're a fiduciary fee-only advisory firm that likes to take care of our clients, looking at them from all aspects of their financial life. So one of the things we look at is insurance. And today we want to talk about long-term care insurance, get to understand it a little bit better. Hopefully when we're done, you'll know more about what has changed in long-term care insurance, because it's certainly evolved over the years. So since we don't sell at Baypoint Wealth, we are not insurance agents. We always partner with someone. So today we have Jaren Pelicano with us, because she is one of the people that we like to partner with. And so Jaren, would you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you, and thanks for giving some time to talk about long-term care. It's on people's minds, I feel like, more than ever. I really was trained as a social worker. I still am a licensed clinical social worker and practice social work. But over the years, doing that and working with families and individuals, I started to see the common theme of the impact a long-term care event has on people, whether it's, you know, a 40-year-old client who's got kids under 18 and she's managing, you know, her children, her family, job, and then also supporting possibly a parent or another family member. So, you know, also an older parent or, you know, older adult who is requiring some support or feeling guilty. You know, I start to hear these themes in mental health. And so it caused me to then become more interested in looking at the planning process. Where's the void? How can people be better prepared? How can they put a financial piece together for themselves? And so that led me to become an insurance, you know, licensed insurance agent to help, you know, people work through their planning process as well.
That's wonderful. I love your background and where you come into this from, really looking at it from what the clients are needing and seeing that need. So Jaren, do you want to share your screen with us?
Sure, yeah, let me share my screen and we'll get started. So we're going to try to be really time conscientious and really cover a lot in a short amount of time to make it doable for people. So looking at, there I am. We already talked about that. Let's move forward. So what are we going to cover today? Yeah, we're going to talk about what long-term care is. We're going to talk about the cost, current cost, projected cost. What are care options? What are my options for paying for care? Looking at what is long-term care insurance? How does that piece sometimes fit into your strategy? And how to make a plan. You know, what are some good questions and components to make a very good plan? So let's start with what long-term care is, because that can even be confusing for people. So, you know, I would say, think about your day so far. You know, you woke up, you got out of bed, you showered, you dressed, you know, you made some breakfast, ate your breakfast. Those are things that we consider to be part of your daily life. And so long-term care isn't so much something when you think of an acute event, it's more, can you do those daily things without support? Once you start to need support to do some of those things, that typically is what you would think of with long-term care. We often also, you know, have in our minds, it's for older people, it's for something that we're going to need maybe later in life, but it is important to note that you can need long-term care, you know, without being an older adult. So I think right now in our country, there's probably 30 to 40% of people that are getting long-term care or needing long-term care that are under the age of 65, you know. So again, I've listed here some common diagnoses, some things that I'm sure really people can relate to: Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS. You know, these are all similar things that put people into, you know, a care situation. So I think these probably all are very familiar to most people. So knowing really what care is, so who's going to need care? And I think, like we were just saying, we have this association that it is older people, and that is correct. 70% of people over the age of 65 are going to need care at some point in their life. And you think about, wow, that's a lot. And why is that? And that really is because we are living longer. We are, the life expectancy is continued to increase. And so that basically equates to people needing some gradual progressive care, which really fits what long-term care support is, right? Women are more likely to need care. There's a lot of ways you can kind of pinpoint, who could be more likely to need care, but we know that there is a statistically high rate of incident of needing care if you're over the age of 65. Thinking about too, so where do you receive care? Care can be given in home. It can be given in an assisted living, in a community support center, like an adult daycare, nursing homes, hospice care. There's a variety of settings where people receive long-term care. The most popular or the most desired is generally in-home care. I think that it's around 80% of people really say that they prefer to age in place at home. And I think that we're going to continue to see that increase, especially with what we're all experiencing now with COVID.
Yeah.
And so I think that trend will definitely continue.
Yeah. Tell me about hospice care, because when I think of hospice care, our family has experienced having someone in hospice, and they had someone come out automatically and help us, but the family came out and stayed with her and helped administer the medicine and provide care and comfort to her during that time. So how would long-term care work with hospice?
So hospice, some hospice services are provided under your, Medicare benefit, if it is someone who's older, or a health insurance sometimes. But, with hospice, there's generally other services and other needs, and I think it is the type of, when people want to really have the maximum amount of control and the maximum amount of support, and be able to make those plans and implement those, that's where long-term care, you could either pay for extra support, or an insurance product, something like that would certainly come in handy to provide that extra service during hospice care.
Oh yeah, those are difficult times.
Yeah, definitely. So looking at what care is, and then how much does it cost. So this is the numbers for really the average cost of care for 1 year currently. So I broke down care at home because that's generally where people prefer, and also there's a large amount of people that do receive care there. So it's looking at about $55,000 per year. These are the average for Maryland, and really anywhere in that kind of Mid-East region. The private room in a nursing home is going to cost on average for 1 year of care $120,000. So you can see these are big numbers. It's important to keep in mind that the average length of care is generally 2 to 3 years. So you can see how quickly this cost adds up. Even looking ahead, so this is 15 years ahead. What are we looking at for in-home? You can see the jump up to 85, the jump for the skilled nursing in a private room, 187. Again, multiply that, and it's like huge sticker shock, for people. And so you think about too, sure, there's outliers. You may not need 2 to 3 years of care. It could be less than that, but then you also have the outliers for something with a cognitive disability, the brain-based dementias and things like that. Most people then get into care situations that could last anywhere from 5 to 10 years,
Yeah, because they're healthy otherwise.
Yes, absolutely. So these costs can be, devastating to individuals and their families. And I think it's important to note that the majority of the cost does fall on the family. And the reason is because these costs lie outside of what your insurance is going to cover, or what a Medicare is going to cover, or what your prescription plan, all of those things that are associated with paying your normal healthcare cost. This is separate. So it does really fall on the family.
What was the inflation rate on those numbers?
So those are 3%, and that generally has been the trend over, I would say, like the last 20 years. You've seen that 3% rise. I think that something interesting that has come up is that in the past probably 12 to 18 months, we have really seen that there was a bump in cost of around more the 5% range. And a lot of that had to do with our unemployment rate at the time, which was very low, cost of caregiving, finding caregivers and things. So that was quite an unusual time, that we were seeing care costs really even go up even higher. But I think generally, we use that 3% because that has been kind of the holding average. So that was those projections were based on that. So I think now that, we've talked a little bit about and have a framework for what care is, where you can get care, how much it's likely to cost, thinking about, so then what motivates people to move forward? What kind of moves you to make a plan, or why is it important? And I always hear three things, sometimes I hear all three of them at one time, and they're not in any particular order, because this is where it comes down to individual, values and what's important to you. But the first is just statistically, there is a strong likelihood that you're going to need care, right? That 70% number is, that's pretty high. So it's that fear or worry, concern, this could happen to me, right? The other would be, I've worked with, my, advisor, Yvonne, and she has put together a really good diversified balanced plan for me. And we've really strategized, right, how to make a retirement strategy. And I, have figured out, how to take all my earnings from over the years and how they're going to last me so that I can retire. And, you have that all mapped out. But the problem is, what's the biggest risk to derailing that plan really is a healthcare event, right? So that's the other thing people are worried about. And then the other piece, I think, is the emotional piece, the worry. Anyone that has had this firsthand experience with a loved one or a family member understands that these are not easy situations to get through. They're stressful, logistically figuring out, how do we do this? Physically, they can put a strain on people. The emotion part of it and the family relationships. Also, I think it's always interesting to note that most caregivers also spend a portion of their own savings and their own earnings to help provide support for someone. So these things are really, these are the worries, right? This is the concern, basically, in a nutshell right here.
Yeah.
So I think that, knowing that you are understanding, right, the risk, and understanding, this is something I should be thinking about. So how would I cover it? How would I pay for it? And I think, one of the things people, think about is what part, or what can I expect to get from my government programs in terms of Medicare and Medicaid. These are the ones that ring a bell for most people. And so looking at those, let's think about Medicare. We're not going to go really in depth, but just to give you like bird's eye view, a couple of things to kind of keep in mind. Medicare is like any other health insurance, basically. It's just that it's federally funded. and people qualify for it when they're 65 or older. And, or sometimes if you have a long-standing disability, you could have Medicare, but Medicare is simply that. It's health insurance. It's to address your acute health needs. It's to address returning you to a prior state of health and getting you better. Okay. So outside of that long-term care realm. Then we think about Medicaid, which is also a government funded program. It is federal and state combined. So it's can vary state to state because that's where it's regulated more on the state basis. But Medicaid is, you have to think of it's income means tested, which basically you have to meet certain income qualifications to be able to qualify for it. So it generally fits the niche for people that really have no other option to pay for care, have no other means to pay for care. And it really was intended to be the public safety net to provide services to those that were most vulnerable and in those kind of situations where there were no other options. So, you know, sometimes it serves a purpose, right? Medicaid is a huge lifesaver for people. And if that is a circumstance that I think, you know, I'm sure you've come across it, Yvonne, before with certain clients, you know, there is definitely a piece for Medicaid, and it's important to help individuals in those situations work with a very reputable elder care attorney, estate attorney, make sure that you can do whatever you can do, you know, to either get the qualification for Medicaid or protect any asset that you possibly could, you know, to get Medicaid. But you are going to have to meet those low income standards. So then looking at private health insurance, I kind of already spoke with that, you know, with Medicare, it's health insurance. It's not to address long-term care, and disability is just an insurance, you know, that some people may have, but that replaces your income that you can't, you know, earn because of a disability that you have. So knowing that kind of, I guess the short answer of, is the government going to take care of this for me? Generally, no, or not really. So then what do you do? How do you cover this cost? So you're either going to pay for it yourself, or you're going to use an insurance product to help pay for it. Looking at self-pay, this is where working with, you know, Yvonne is super valuable, right? Because you have a plan put in place. You know, you have a well-balanced and diversified portfolio. That's outside my wheelhouse, you know, that's like what your specialty is. So, you know, these are the questions though. If you need care tomorrow, where am I getting that money from if I'm gonna use my own resources? And so what's accessible and, you know, liquid I can get? What if I need to liquidate other things, you know, you're going to strategize with somebody to think about, you know, the least impact to the overall portfolio, you know, what's going to not be penalized, and what's, you know, where you're going to not have to do or minimize your tax implication. So all of those things are really important to take into consideration for self-pay, you know, and also thinking about, well, if I do turn on, you know, you know, the faucet and need some of this, you know, the drain of the money, what's the impact to that going to start to be on, you know, this strategy and this plan you put into place? What's the impact to myself, and also people that are interested in a transfer of, you know, their assets, or a transfer of, you know, anything to their beneficiaries. What's the impact, right? What's going to be left if it starts to be drained with a care event? Yeah. So, and I'm sure you've had numerous conversations with people in those circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're frequently worried about their spouse. So
yeah,
that person needs care, and they still have a spouse that's healthier than them that's going to need care later potentially.
Absolutely. And I think that is 100%. I agree with that, because if someone needs care and you start to do that drain, what's going to be left, you know, because I think we have to think of it also in not just like, oh, you know, it's not doom and gloom and sickness and, you know, illness, but again, looking at that expectancy and living a long time, that money needs to last a long time, right? It's that outliving the income, you know, concern that we talked about. So insurance basically, you know, where does that fit? And I think that if you're, you know, looking at the easiest way I think of insurance is you're basically saying, I don't want to take on the risk of the cost and covering the cost of this myself, or I don't want to take on, you know, all of it myself. I want to share this risk. And so you're giving the risk to the insurance company. You're giving the risk, you know, by managing that risk, by getting a product that's going to cover and give you a benefit when you need it to pay for any of these long-term care services that you can need. That's what it is. So right now there's basically 4 different types of long-term care insurance. And so again, we'll talk about these kind of from a high level overview. You know, you're not gonna, you know, decide today like, oh, that would be for me. You know, again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of looking at all your options. And so this is really to highlight that there are many options, okay? So there's 4 different life insurance options. Basically, the first would be traditional. It's, I would say, what you would think of as, you know, your a term life policy, your car insurance, your house insurance. You know, you're going to pay a premium and you're going to get a benefit if you need it. And so traditional, quite simply, will help protect your assets, you know, because you're sharing that risk. It will give you the peace of mind that, you know, you put something in place and that you have a benefit if you need it. And, you know, you are going to pay the premium throughout the duration. You know, so some people don't like that. It feels, again, a lot like regular insurance. I'm paying for something I may never need, which is the downside of it. But it does give you protection, and you are sharing the risk.
Okay.
So the second type, I think, is like, I think if, you know, this is like the warm, fuzzy, everybody kind of is drawn to this second type, which is what is more commonly known as the hybrid, you know, because it is a blend of a asset-based life policy and a long-term care insurance policy together. And so that means basically it maintains cash value. It still stays as part of, you know, your overall asset and your, you know, because the value stays there. You're basically going to pay a premium that is fixed, either and you're going to have it spread over a fixed amount of time. So it would either be a one-time pay, 5 or 10 years, but it's a fixed premium. You get the benefit, you know, the benefits there. But what the feel good is for people is that if you change your mind, you don't want it, you get a return of your premium. If you don't use the benefit, that goes to your beneficiaries tax-free. If you only use a little bit of the benefit, the remainder goes. So it really is have your cake, eat it too, you know, which is why it's the feel good, you know, probably the most liked insurance policy, because it's not the use it or lose it kind of mentality that people sometimes struggle with. Looking at another option would be a life insurance with just a rider on it, you know, typical policy, you're paying a premium, it's going to pay you a benefit upon, or pay your beneficiaries a benefit upon your death. This is something like having a chronic illness rider where if you are diagnosed, you're allowed to pull from that what would be your death benefit prior to your passing. So you have access to that ahead of time.
Okay.
Also thinking about annuities and where do they fit in this planning process. I think, you know, annuities are a life insurance product, or are an insurance product. So I think the annuity fit is most likely for maybe people that have missed the opportunity to be able to get a traditional long-term care policy, or even a hybrid policy, or maybe they're in a situation where their a health condition may prevent them from being able to do medical underwriting.
Is that
So
what you mean by miss the opportunity?
yeah, I think it's generally for people who are older, who maybe may not be able to meet the age qualification for one of the other insurance products.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but so there is a place. I think it's important, kind of what, with any of these though, what is the advantage of insurance? I think that the highlight is you're not carrying all the risk yourself. There's generally tax advantages to, any type of insurance payout benefit that you get. And so those are important things to remember, that they do have these in common, and they do provide you with some peace of mind in your strategy. So looking at, I would say, important things to think about, so when you start to go through some of this process and you get closer to thinking about, because I do say that it really is like a fine tooth comb, you kind of have to, you go through it many, many times, to kind of narrow down, some people, insurance isn't the solution, but if you get to a point where insurance is a good solution for you, even then you have to think about, so how much benefit do I need? Am I comfortable self-paying up to this amount? But if I'm one of those outliers and I may need, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of care, I see those numbers going up into the hundreds and hundreds of thousands, over the $1 million mark, 20, 30 years out. What do I do about that? I don't want that risk, And so you have to really go through and think, how much do I need? How long is this, benefit going to last me? How am I going to qualify for a benefit? What am I going to have to do to get, to start receiving care? How are the benefits going to be paid? Carriers design their products differently, so benefits can be paid by reimbursement. Some plans are doing indemnity. There's a lot of different ways and things to think about, when you're choosing an option.
Explain what you mean by indemnity.
So one of the things that has become really popular, and the carriers are constantly tweaking their products because they want to sell products, right? So they're trying to figure out ways to make them user friendly and to know what consumers really want. So these cash indemnity plans have become very, very popular because they give the ultimate flexibility and freedom, and kind of allow you to really maintain a lot of control, which basically, when you qualify to get care and you are able to start turning on your benefit, cash indemnity will send you up to your monthly amount.
Okay.
Just in check. And so you use that and disperse it and dispense it at your will.
Okay, so the monthly amount is determined when you get the insurance, but then when the monthly amount comes in, whatever it's needed for, if it's transportation or whatever it is, whatever you need, you can.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so desirable, because what we know is that often family members do provide some care or some support, even if you're utilizing, home health aides or other paraprofessionals to come in and provide care. Often family members, if they are local and able, they want to be able to do certain things. And so this allows a client to say, I'm going to, use this to cover your gas expense, to, for you to be able to take me to the doctors, or for you to be able to do, and provide the support. So it really is the ultimate in flexibility. And that's why people really like it. So the others are kind of, thinking about, obviously care cost is going to increase and continue to increase. So you want to make sure that you're policy and your plan is going to be able to keep up with those increases in cost. People will often say, when's the right time, to plan? When should I be thinking about this? And it varies. I think, a real sweet spot for people, honestly, is in their 40s and 50s when they're considering insurance, only because generally you are in very good health. You get a much, much better rate. And so you design a policy for someone like that, that's going to make sure, though, that it's going to grow to be what you need it to be when you're most likely to need care, which is generally late 70s, 80. So if you're getting a policy at age 50, we need to look at it like what 30 years from now is going to be, right? Sure. So it's really important to make sure, again, and highlight why long-term care planning and using an insurance product isn't cookie cutter. It's not a, it's not a kind of one-stop, here you go, this is your insurance policy that's going to protect you. This is something that really is, individualized and fits your particular needs.
I have a question for you that someone has asked.
Sure.
Could you elaborate more on age qualifications?
Sure. So the age qualifications can sometimes vary by carrier, and they also can vary depending on what's going on in the outside world. So, for example, in response to COVID and even outside of COVID, part of what was going on with the economy, and lowering interest rates to 0%, that all impacts the insurance industry. And so those are types, I'm giving those as examples of how carriers may decide to make adjustments to their age qualifications. So generally speaking, I will say that it is possible, and most carriers will allow people up into their 70s to apply. So, there's just no set specific number I can give for that. But, there is an example I can share of, several carriers decided as a response to, what was going on in the outside world, they lowered the age of applicant could not be over the age of 70. So, that was something that came as a response to that. We're already seeing, these things fluctuate, and that's why it's important, I think, too, to really explore all your options, explore numerous carriers, utilize an insurance specialist that really knows and has access to all of the products out there to make sure that you're getting the best that you can get, depending on your age and everything.
That's your role. You know the different carriers that you have access through and what their different requirements are, and can help sort of guide them.
Yes. Yeah. So, that's in my particular work, it was important for me to be able to offer people products from any carrier. For me, it wasn't about utilizing any one particular product. It was more about seeing the person as a whole person. Like, you shared with your fiduciary approach, right? Like, we're really trying to do and put together the best thing for your individual situation, and looking at that whole picture, because it definitely is not a one size fits all. So hopefully that answered the question. Oh, go ahead.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So moving to look at, putting a plan in place. And so who are these important people that you should be partnering with, and some of them are, you utilize in a planning process and also in a crisis process. But, obviously, looking at whoever you've been partnering with for your financial planning. And a good estate attorney, often, you should have a lot of stuff in place, for any type of, your wills and all this, that poor estate attorneys are often caught, so in crisis situations, and, you know, working with one that can really handhold you through that process, because it is so very stressful when there's, you know, a crisis, and the lack of planning is just, you know, it can be really tricky, and it's important to really work with someone that you trust and who you feel, you know, you can work with. And an elder care attorney, also somebody who's, you know, can maybe address some of the Medicaid issues if you need. And so these are people that I partner with all the time, and, you know, am more than happy to recommend very, you know, helpful people. Also on the other side, looking at, you know, there's so many supportive services that often, you know, families aren't even aware of, you know, and they continue to change and evolve. So, you know, there's geriatric care managers, you know, who are generally like licensed clinical social workers or registered nurses, people that can help support and manage someone's care from A to Z, you know, coordinating appointments, transportation, looking at how our family structures are now. And, you know, maybe people don't have any family that are local, you know, so these people do it all. I mean, they're, you know, coordinating and doing FaceTime and calls to connect people and share information they gather from the doctors, and just so valuable.
Yeah.
There's placement coordinators, you know, people that help you find the right place. You know, you want to go to assisted living or a nursing facility. Where's the best place? You know, what fits your particular need? Staying at home, like we've said, is so popular. So, but what's it going to take, you know, for you to stay at home? You know, how are you going to be safe if you're there? You know, is there, you know, a ramp? Are there ADA accommodations and things that you need to really adjust in order for the home aging in place to be possible, you know, and safe for you to be able to do that? So, you know, I just really encourage people that if they do feel like, you know, I don't even know which direction to go, which is so common, especially if it's something you've never dealt with, please reach out, you know, to myself. Even, you know, Ivana, you get these questions too all the time. You know, our clients, even though they have a financial plan, they sometimes need those supportive services. They need to know where to turn, you know, for that.
It's a difficult time. They need help.
Absolutely.
How does long-term care doesn't necessarily pay for these services, right? They don't pay for the advisor or the attorney. How does it fit in the insurance with the supportive services?
So an insurance product would support some of these auxiliary services. You're correct. They're not going to pay for your advisor. You know, they're not going to cover the estate attorney, but the supportive services that you need in order to get that care are going to be covered with a lot of these policies now. Again, this is the trend that we're seeing. You know, the carriers have made these adjustments. This isn't 30 years ago where really your care option was, you know, you go to a nursing home, you know, and knowing again that care has become more and more gradual because of that, you know, aging and that drawn out process. So policies do cover a lot of this. And like I mentioned with the indemnity, it makes it so that's where that flexibility and it's that, you know, easy utilization of that benefit that really, you know, is priceless.
Yeah, definitely.
So looking at some of the, you know, trends, and we've already hit on some of these, but, you know, Yvonne and I were talking about how it's really important to, you know, look at, so what's going on right now, you know, in addition to kind of, you know, the overview. So, you know, we definitely have talked about the staying at home. And I think that that's relevant now. You know, we're, you know, hearing about it, we're reading about it, we're experiencing it. You know, unfortunately, in this pandemic, people in communal situations are very, very vulnerable. And this has been devastating to, you know, families who have a loved one that they maybe can't see, who, you know, they can't get, you know, so, and the unknown of when is that going to be different, you know?
Who would have ever anticipated not being able to go and visit a family member?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that the one thing with COVID that, I was thinking about, it's what we're all kind of experiencing right now, I think is so similar to what happens to us when we experience an unexpected health event. Like, you're right. Who would have ever thought back in January, February, that this is what our June and July would look like,
Yeah.
And what does it bring up for us? It's really emotionally stressful. We keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Things change, what's going to happen the day to day, and so trying to figure out, being worried about the safety and well-being and being able to see family members and friends, and also the financial piece, right? Worrying about your livelihood, how is your income going to be impacted? Can you do your job, while this is going on? Or, is your income going to be impacted? And then also with the economy, how is it going to impact this planning, that you've been putting in place? So it really does hit those same things that cause such discomfort, right? Those stressors of that financial and that emotional worry. So
has COVID had any effect on the underwriting process or the ability to qualify for care? Not qualify for care, but qualify for the insurance.
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And that's, again, something that we're seeing. It's evolving, right? So, carriers are, some are saying, we need to, we're not going to consider anybody that's had COVID until they're at least 6 months symptom free, or 6 months without a positive, test. And, then they can, submit an application. And I think that these are things that will continue to change with the medical underwriting, because I think there's concerns, obviously, that there could be ongoing impacts even once you start to recover and feel well. There can be other longer lasting things. So I think it will continue to evolve.
But as the carriers determine their risk, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the highlights too, like carriers also, the benefit of using an insurance product is you're getting rid of some of that risk, but the insurance carriers at the same time are constantly, right, they're constantly monitoring their risk, and so, because these are guaranteed contracts that they have with their clients, that they need to be able to make sure that they can pay out everything they've promised, right? So absolutely, that is part of the calculations. Yep. We talked about the cash indemnity. It's, like I said, it's hugely popular. Even the traditional policies have, the carriers have changed to having at least some offering of a cash indemnity. Some will say we'll pay you up to 30% of your monthly benefit amount in a cash indemnity. So, there's lots of different ways to explore that, but it's definitely the ultimate, because I feel like, why do people plan? They want to plan, they want to feel like they have some control over it, they want to feel like they're managing it, and nothing allows you to do that more than if you're absolutely.
Because there's all kinds of costs that are way beyond just the normal things that come to mind,
right?
And especially if you've got family members making sacrifices for you too.
Yes, absolutely. So,
or having to pay if there's not a family member to do it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So, and then the increase in the brain-based illnesses, we kind of touched on too. So I don't really need to belabor that. I'm trying to be mindful of the time, but, so just knowing that, the projection for increase in Alzheimer's and those types of dementias are, they're continuing to increase. And so those are really be devastating,
We can keep ourselves physically healthy. We go to the gym, run, do all these things, but we only have so much control over some of these types of illnesses.
Absolutely. And so, while they're making some improvements and, doing their research, and hopefully things will, the outcomes will be more optimistic. the reality of it is they're slow and they're progressive, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
um,
I think you mentioned also sometimes the carriers will allow some group settings with if you've got maybe a workplace setting where you could get a group together. Is that?
yeah, it's becoming more popular, for employers to offer some type of long-term care insurance benefit. And so I think that would be wonderful. I think in our country, 50%, I think, of long-term care right now is funded by Medicaid, and so how sustainable is that? And that is a concern. And, that's why it is on people's minds, but employers, there's a lot of ways to utilize the traditional policies and offer those as a benefit. A lot of carriers will, it's a very small amount of people that have to enroll in the plan. Some are as little as 3 employees. So that's a very small amount, so even small businesses, this is something that could be beneficial, for even small businesses at that, low enrollment requirement.
So let's say I've decided I want to get long-term care insurance. I've contacted you. We're working through this. Do I communicate this also with family or my advisor? How do I incorporate it? Make sure that I've done a thorough job.
Yeah, so there's absolutely, I think that as you put your plan together, you want to collaborate with anybody that could possibly be impacted by needing care, or that's going to be involved in providing care. So involving family, friends, your community and supports, whoever it is that you can pull from, it's very important to kind of fill them in on what you would like to see happen, as well as obviously work through this with your financial advisor. 100%. It's so important, to include and collaborate with everyone, to make sure that you can kind of try to keep things as close, on track as possible. Sometimes things are just out of our control.
At home or not at home. Let
Right.
people do what you want to.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think Kim is going to, follow up with, everyone who signed up and who was able to log on and join us. And so we're going to be sending, a guide with some really good basic tips for how to really start to think about your individualized plan. And some of that will be in there, but I always say, the collaborative approach really is the best, because then that way you're kind of trying to encompass, your whole situation.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons we like working with you, because we share the same values, and that seeing the client as a whole, wanting to do what's best with the client.
Right.
Also being able to talk to you as you're helping the clients and work together as a team, make sure that's what's best for them.
Yeah. Well, the feeling is mutual, because it does take a team. So it's always good, to partner with you guys.
Yeah. What about when you have the insurance? How do you know when you can use it? If you have a family member, a parent that is slowly becoming more forgetful, maybe you're concerned about whether they should be driving, you're making these difficult decisions. Do you call the care manager, or is it a placement coordinator? Who do you talk to?
So there are neurocognitive specialists that do, evaluations. They also will do baseline assessments. Sometimes, I've had people come to me and they'll say like, oh, I'm not really sure. Like you said, it's kind of questionable. Like, we're not positive. You can always go in, do a baseline assessment, which is really helpful. I think for anybody, 70 or over, to have some type of baseline to know if there is changes, then it's really easier to kind of pinpoint. But that would be more of like a neurocognitive specialist. There's, I know many in the area that I, refer people to, or, it would fall under the category of like licensed psychologist, licensed clinical social worker, that type of, that type of service. But that's
it does fall on a family member, right? When to make that call as to when we need to do this.
Yes.
So it goes back to that communication and
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, and then sometimes you need someone, to help facilitate some of those difficult conversations, and that's where the care managers can also be super helpful, because these are people that have had a lot of these difficult conversations before. They're a neutral person, which can kind of help mediate and, mitigate the conflict that sometimes comes up for that. There's a lot of emotion around a lot of that. And so it's so beneficial to be able to get that. Or, I've had families say to me before, you tell them, because they'll listen to you. They're not going to listen to me, And so I think, even if it's a scenario like that, but there's 100%, you utilize the supports, because that's their specialty, just like, you're helping financially and, making that plan, that's their specialty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we would really need that help during those times in life, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's wonderful, Jaren. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think it's a topic that maybe isn't the most, everybody doesn't want to think about that time in life, but it's important. The planning aspect is important and can take away some of that stress that makes us want to avoid it. Knowing that it's in place and knowing that you can think through the different choices and make some decisions for yourself, it's huge. Thank you, Jaren.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I agree, it's, often not the most, popular topic of conversation, but it's definitely so important. And so I just think it's these opportunities like this just to help give people as much information is so valuable. So I think it was great that you put this together.
I appreciate your time too. Thank you, Jaren.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. You can reach out to either me or Jaren. We'd love to help you with any questions that you have.